Masterpiece Imbroglio, an adventure from Keys from the Golden Vault, written for 5th level characters. This adventure involves the player characters being hired by an organization called the Cognoscenti Esoterica in order to recover a magical, intelligent, talking painting, one of a kind, in fact, called, of Constantinople, who was once thought of as the most beautiful man alive. The actual Constantinople is not present in this adventure. He may not even be alive anymore, but the portrait is. The player characters are trying to recover this portrait from the Agile Hands Thieves Guild and break into their guild house in doing so. The adventure begins when the players meet a member of the Cognoscenti Esoterica at a barn, more or less in the outskirts of a city, amongst a field of corn. There they meet Adrisa Calamorte, or Calamort, who has a captive, a man named Grinky Brithwort, a member of the Agile Hands Thieves Guild, who has given them information about where the portrait is and the general outline of the guild house. Now, the guild house is an old, boarded up building. The guild itself is mostly ignored by the government of the city it's in. What I like about this adventure is it doesn't take place in any particular city. You can drop the guild house and this Agile Hand Thieves Guild into really any city that where it fits. And it could be a minor thieves guild or it could be part of a larger one, depending on your campaign. But it's great for a city adventure, like many of the adventures in Keys from the Golden Vault. Now, Grinky is a captive and doesn't want to die, so he's willing to give up information. He gives information of who the guildmaster of the guild is, Guildmaster Dusk, and some information on her being an assassin, how to get inside, who the guards are, how many members there are, where he thinks the portrait could be inside the guild house, how the supply deliveries work, all information that would be great for the player characters planning a heist. Again, Keys from the Golden Vault is all about different heist adventures. He also gives some information what he knows about the portrait. It was painted by an artist called Disguy Kwan. It's very hard to pronounce. And commissioned by someone by the name of Di Yanni Gristhorn, once a grand dame of the criminal and underworld of whatever city the DM chooses it to be part of. The Agile Hand also likely has a bio already for the portrait, so it's very important that the player characters try to secure the portrait immediately, otherwise it might disappear. Grinky also provides a map of the guild house, which it's actually this map. This is handed out to the player characters, showing the first and second story. Again, it's two buildings next to each other. It also has a basement area, which is sort of a trap-filled maze used for testing thieves. And he does know there's a secret door in this area, but he doesn't know about a secret area, which, if you see the actual player's map here for the adventure, this is the secret area that the player characters don't know about. It includes prison cells and some hidden gem areas where treasures are kept. Player characters may or may not go into the basement. In my group's case, they went into the maze area and figured out what it was, and then decided to ignore a series of trap-filled rooms, and it just wasn't worth their time, especially as they'd already found the portrait in its particular location. The DM, by the way, can move the portrait if you don't feel like if you feel like the player characters might look up the adventure, for example, which unfortunately some players do. Mix things up a little bit, put the portrait somewhere else. It's actually a better idea to hide the portrait with clues that it might be in a hidden area instead of it just being, say, in the tower. It could be really anywhere in this house. Or an interesting twist is what if after the player characters arrive, the buyers arrive? The adventure doesn't really say who the buyers are, but it could be someone really important, such as a Rock Sasha, for example. a dangerous enemy who will perhaps stop at nothing to take the portrait from the player characters. And of course, it could be someone less powerful, but it depends on your character's level, whether or not they're fifth level or a little bit higher level than that. Like Sasha at fifth level is going to be very dangerous, even though it might just be all by itself. Now, the player characters have on top of the map another lead they can look into if the DM chooses to use it. An individual, member of the guild, in fact, called Elix the Saint, who is a regular at a local tavern where he goes to flirt with the bartender, a bartender called Carissa, and the player characters will be able to use that to their advantage, mostly because he has a master key and all the doors that are used have decent locks on them. And I say decent as in the DCs to open them is 15. Now, the player characters don't need to find him or get his information or get his master key. If you have a good rogue in the group, it's kind of not even necessary because honestly, a good rogue with enough time can open any lock at DC 15 without even trying, just by taking a minute or so to do it and to keep making checks. Now, the player characters could, as it suggests, survey the building if they want using various magics at fifth level. They might have clairvoyance, they might have locate object, and a few other spells, and it might be useful in going into this building and exploring it that way. I don't think they'd have arcane eye yet unless they're a little bit higher level. If they do, I would suggest maybe adding some additional threats and definitely going with the idea of a buyer should be there soon, or maybe it could be a fiendish buyer and there's already a couple of lesser fiends waiting for their boss to show up, maybe that the player characters don't know about. That way, when they go in, there are still some surprises. Now, there's some general information on the guild house itself, like mini adventures, the floors, different lighting, walls, windows, all that. Some suggested names for the various members of the guild if the player characters need them or the DM needs them. Uh, the situation if the guild house is on high alert and the players try to show up then and where various members should be, such as if Elix the Saint is there. By the way, he's acting as a bandit captain. You can see what some of these other enemies are. And again, this adventure was written really between the 2014 edition and the 2024 edition, but all this information is provided here. It shows you the stats for 2024. However, you can run this in either edition and it works fine either way. And at this point, I'll re-show you this map. This is, again, the player's map, which shows the two different sections of the guild house. Again, it's two-storied. Interesting enough, it has a bunch of different guests staying in the upper floors here, and then the tower room here and bedroom is actually where the guildmaster sleeps with her paramour, to say the least. And there's just some interesting little chambers. There's a stable. There's random hallways that go to different rooms. Some doors are locked. There is a doppelganger. The player characters don't know that this person is a doppelganger, of course. It'd be interesting maybe if instead of this person appearing as Jaemont the Sinner, maybe this person is maybe the player characters know Jaemont the Sinner. Or maybe the doppelganger has taken one of the player characters' forms, which is just a little more interesting. Kind of gives it away a little bit, but it's just a little different than what the adventure presents. Ideas, though. There are some various different chambers here. Again, there's a coin box here in this room, and just, different accesses to different rooms. Most of these rooms are pretty standard for this type of building. There's a kitchen, there's a main dining hall, things like that. There are a few traps floating around. These are kind of standard rooms, but they work for this situation. There are some thugs, and one of the tougher bosses is a gladiator guy. And you'll find a room full of crates with some interesting things in them that the player characters can claim, and it's just like stolen goods, which is one of the things I like about this adventure. It actually thinks about some of the stolen goods that this thieves guild might actually have, other than the portrait. It's more thought out like that. In one case, there is a spyglass, which is quite valuable. I think it's non-functional because it's missing a lens, but it's something that could be fixed without a mending spell. I'll note it's missing a lens. Mending doesn't fix that. And just different people in this case. This is a merchant who happens to be staying the night at this place. It's almost like an inn for people that do illegal activity. things like that. Other rooms for different people. In fact, one of these individuals is actually an Oni in disguise, who is, in fact, this individual Gwish, who his true nature will, well, it'll prove interesting. He's also wearing a ring of animal influence, which is a nice ring the player characters will end up getting their hands on, likely, and is not an overpowered item. This is an item, I believe, more from 2024 D&D, but it's available more or less in 2014 as well. As you go into different rooms, again, there's standard rooms like the balconies and things like that. This is the stolen goods room with chests with different poisoners kits, casks of exquisite wine, elven wine, crates of thieves tools, more spyglasses, and other things of interest, including a few magic items that if the player characters take the time, they'll find some interesting stuff here. This is also where they might encounter Elix the Saint if they didn't encounter him at the tavern. And eventually you get to just different offices. Here's an image of the guildmaster Dus resting in bed with her paramour, who is a local noble. And you get her office and what's on her table and some interesting things there, which the DM can throw in some fun little notes if you want, just to tie it into another adventure or into a campaign right there. Again, Guildmaster Dusk is an assassin, which at 5th level is going to be a pretty dangerous foe, but she should be pretty dangerous as she is the Guildmaster. There is also a young noble whose name is Dartanal Livereth. He is a human noble. It might be interesting if the player characters have some connection to the Livereth family before this adventure, or maybe they find his signet ring, or this ties into maybe a plot to do with his family. There was another adventure in Keys from the Golden Vault called Vidorant's Vault, and there's some secrets about some noble families the player characters might find there. So it'd be interesting if you're running both because they work well together. If that family happened to be the Liverets, there's a connection there, and just some hidden items and all that. And again, if these people are encountered in the bedchamber, they don't have their armor on. This being the guildmaster and her paramour. But they could reach for their weapons fairly easily. There's a good chance the player characters might just try to break in at night. Now, in the standard setup of the adventure, the portrait is in the Tower Peak. This is kind of the obvious location where it would be, but the DM, like I said, could move it. There is a gas trap here for those who try to steal the painting, which my player characters looked for a trap, and I don't think they found it. I'm pretty sure they set off the trap. There's also the cellars, which have a series of different trap-filled hallways meant for trading thieves and all that in their guild, a murky pool, and just different things that are kind of interesting, minor encounters. And eventually, through a maze, they eventually will get to where the hidden cells are. The DM could put someone of interest in there that has been missing for some time, or that maybe the player characters know, or someone unusual, perhaps, that connects to other adventures. Various storage areas, and with just more supplies, weapons that are kept by the guild. And then in one area is a mimic who is posing as a crate of salted butter, or loves the taste of salted butter, which is just a curious little thing. Now, my player characters, by the way, never found these secret chambers because they never really explored the basement that well, but it's a great idea maybe to hide the portrait in the basement or in the secret chamber with maybe a clue that it's been moved recently or that it's not where it's supposed to be. In any case, the adventure is pretty straightforward, and once the players raid the guild house and find the portrait, then they can bring the portrait back to Adresia Calamorte, and then she can give them a reward, which she offers to buy it for 500 gold. Now, it is considered a very rare magic item, so obviously it's worth more than 500 gold, but it's really unique. It's not a very powerful magic item. It's more like the kind of thing that's put on a wall, and then most people don't know it's intelligent, and it's used for spying on people. So it has kind of an esoteric value. It's probably worth more than that, and the player characters will likely say they want more than 500 gold for it. This is a good opportunity for the DM to negotiate, although you may get player characters, especially if they try to look up how rare it is and try to claim that it's worth 50,000 gold just because that's the standard price for rare magic items. But again, rarity does not equal actual value if there's no demand for the item. So it's probably not worth 50,000 gold. I think a realistic price for this is probably more like 5,000 gold, basically sold to some noble who could use the portrait as a spying device and all that. Or maybe, perhaps, it's sent to someone else. She does offer also potentially a pair of sending stones as an additional reward, which aren't worth a lot, but they are more or less worth more than the standard 500 gold, and they're very useful. Now, overall, this is a fairly good adventure. It's very easy to plug and play this adventure into any campaign, particularly a city campaign. And every major city, most of them are going to have a thieves guild, and you could use the thieves guild ahead of time as a guild that the player characters run into. It's really easy to set up that if the player characters defeat these rogues, that there may be some rogues left over that might try to get revenge, as the guild might be not entirely wiped out, or there could be a power vacuum situation, which is a great lead to some future adventures, or maybe the player characters fill that vacuum. The DM could do a lot with that. Nonetheless, it's a decent adventure. It's not perfect, as it doesn't do a lot of original stuff other than introduce the portrait, which has a vaguely Portrait of Dorian Gray sort of theme to it. But it's interesting. I would rate it overall a 4.5 out of 5. It's pretty good, not perfect, but it's pretty strong for what it is. And it's an again, it allows the player characters a lot of leeway and to fight against the Thieves Guild. And it's so easy to plug and play this adventure into really any campaign. And it's for that reason, it's worth running, basically. Now, guys, if you like my reviews and you want to see more of them, please like this video and subscribe. Check out my other videos and subscribe for more content.